Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel and another drawing tutorial today. In today's video I am drawing a realistic tiger in coloured pencils and talking through some helpful tips and techniques for how I drew this tiger. I am using the Faber Castell polychromos pencils for this tutorial, and I'm using these pencils because they are oil-based pencils, and oil-based pencils are great for those really fine details, so they are amazing for drawing fur and up-close little details on animals. They are great for blending as well, so for the tiger's eye they are perfect because you can still get a nice creamy texture with the pencils, which will make those eyes look realistic. I am also recording this tutorial in both time-lapse and real-time clips as well, so I'm including some real-time snippets of the drawing process for you so that you can see exactly what I am doing at a much slower pace, and it's just going to help me explain my processes a little bit better as well. I do also have a link to my Patreon page where I'll be uploading real-time tutorials there once a month, so if that is something that you are interested in, the link is in the description box down below. So firstly we are starting with the eye, and I like starting with the eye because I feel the eyes are normally the main focal point of a drawing. It's personally what I am drawn to, and I like to draw the eyes in first and then work around the eyes, but you can start your drawing wherever you want to. When I draw eyes, I'm really focusing on a number of things. So for example, the colours in the eyes, the hues, flexes, veins, shadows and light areas. And you want to focus on these areas because that's going to improve your realistic drawing skills and just bring that drawing to life. The tiger's eye is a little bit far away, so there's not really as much detail in the eye as there would be if it was a really up close shot of the tiger. So say if we were drawing an eye study, but you still want to make sure that you are reflecting what you see in your reference image in the drawing as well. So I like to take my time to build up on all of those different tones and hues in the eyes. Honestly, the biggest tip I can give you for any realistic drawing is to work in layers and build up on those layers. So for the eyes, I'm starting with the really light tones, so for example the light yellows and pale greens, and then working my way up to the yellow ochre tones, oranges and browns. Then I like to just define my outlines and shadows with a much darker tone, so for example black. I love tigers' eyes because they look like they are wearing eyeliner, so they have thick, intense black around the eyes, and those black outlines are really defining the eyes and some of that surrounding fur as well. I like to use really sharp pencils when I'm drawing in the more finer details, so for example with the black outlines and some of those little fur details around the eye, I am using a very sharp black pencil. If you haven't seen my review video on the sharpener that I use, I have an iCard on the screen right now, as that video is definitely worth a watch as that sharpener is fantastic. Okay, so now I'm working on the fur around the eyes, and to help me with drawing in the fur and fur clumps, the first thing I have made sure to do is include some fur details and light sketching of some of the shapes in the fur. So by sketching in some of those little details, it really helps me to see the direction of the fur growth, the shape of the fur, and where the fur clumps are, and it just helps with following that reference photo much more accurately, so it's definitely something I would recommend that you do as well. Now I like to start with a dark pencil to just sketch in some of that fur initially. I'm using the black pencil for this and just very lightly getting in some of that fur around the tiger's eye by stroking and flicking in some of those fur details. So you can see on the screen right now that I have drawn in quite a lot of the fur around the tiger's eye, and I'm going to explain the techniques that I use to draw in the fur. So as I said, I use the black pencil first to just gently draw in some of that fur detail, and this black pencil helps me to establish the fur clumps, the darkest areas and the placement of the fur. So I get in all of those little details first, and then it becomes a process of building up layers and filling in the surrounding areas of fur and working those surrounding areas of fur in with the black stripes. So with black stripes, I'm not just drawing solid lines, I'm etching in that section of fur really slowly, and I'm not going in with a hard pressure, because if you go in with too hard of a pressure too early on, you aren't going to be able to blend and soften out that black or work the black into the other areas. So keep your pencil pressure nice and light and shade rather than create fine details. I then work around that black fur, and I work from light to dark values, so I'll build up on some really light pencils. For example, I use some light creams and ivory colours, Then I built up on some mid-tone values with some yellows, light browns and orange tones, and then I start to build up on some dark values. I then work the tones into the black fur, so I start to sweep some of those lighter tones into the black areas and then use the black pencil to drag some of the black fur lines into the lighter areas. And this just helps show a slow transition from the black stripes into the ginger fur instead of it looking like blocks of colour. So hopefully you can see that there's just soft and subtle transition from the gingery brown fur into the black fur, and it doesn't just look like we've drawn in really harsh and horrible black lines for the stripes. I like to work in stages, and I really take my time with a drawing, especially when I'm drawing realistically, and I personally like to just work on one small section of fur at a time until that area is nice and rendered and looking how I want it to. And I like to work on the black stripes first and then work on the ginger fur or surrounding fur. It's just my preferred method of working, and I find that it helps me just to break down the drawing process even more and work on things one at a time. So with the black fur, you've probably noticed that I'm adding in some grey tones as well, and the reason why I'm adding in grey tones is to make the drawing realistic. Black fur isn't just black, and if you just really study a reference photo of a black animal or black fur, you will see what I mean by that. If you just draw in black fur with a black pencil and you don't work any other colours into the fur, then what is going to happen is you are going to have no definition or depth to the fur. It will be a really intense black with no hues or tones in the black. There won't be any light source in the fur, and it will look flat, and that is the same with stripes. There are grey tones in the stripes because of the light source we have. So for example, the biggest light source we have is the sun or natural light, and the natural light and sun is going to change the hues in the fur. So even in black fur, you will see lighter tones. Grey tones are the most common tones that you're going to see in black fur, and you have cool grey and warm grey tones. So cool grey tones are going to have a very bluish tone to them, so they're going to be quite cold and duller, and warm grey tones have yellow and brown hues in them, so they appear warmer. You could also have some cool and warm grey tones in the fur as well, depending on where the animal is and the light source that they are in. Don't be surprised if you also see some blues and purples in black fur as well. There's quite a lot of magenta in black fur, and again this is something that is affected by light sources, so definitely keep an eye out for those hues in black fur and those lighter areas. So for ginger fur, again, ginger isn't just one colour, and there is a big misconception that tigers are orange. And I see a lot of beginners using really vibrant oranges for drawing ginger fur on tigers, and this is definitely something that you're going to want to avoid doing. If you look at ginger fur, then in ginger fur there's a lot of different tones, so it's not just one solid colour. You've got some really light tones in ginger fur, such as ivory, creams and beige for the really light areas, and then you have some yellowy tones in ginger fur, browns and oranges that have a reddy brown tinge to them as well. So you're going to want to use those colours together by gradually building up on the layers and going from lighter to darker tones to get that desired ginger fur. The great thing about working in layers as well is that you can just build up on all of your tones and values up over time. So if you are finding that one area is looking too light, you can intensify those colours by adding in more mid and darker values. And a great way to intensify colours is by using the side of your pencil to just gently shade in more value and add more layers. So for the drawing of the tiger I have done so far, I'm really just blending out all of the fur over time through my use of layers and just repeating the same steps for each section of fur. Fur is very complex and detailed, so you can expect to work on the same drawing for quite some time, especially if you are doing a full head and chest drawing or even a full body drawing as well. So this drawing took me around 14 hours to complete, and I made sure to take lots of breaks and do it over the course of several days, because if I did it in all one go I'd get bored and I'd start to rush, and that's something that you don't want to do. So it is absolutely okay to take your time with drawing and spread out your drawing process. Coloured pencils are an extremely slow medium to work in and very time consuming as well. So going back to the drawing now, hopefully you can see how by gradually building up on my layers over time and working in stages, that's really helped me to get the realistic look that I am wanting. The tiger stripes, although clearly visible, definitely are very soft and subtle. They don't stand out too much and they don't just look like blocks of colour or lines. They blend well with the surrounding fur, and the ginger fur doesn't look too orange either, which is one of the biggest problems I find when beginners try and draw ginger fur. Okay, so now for this section of the tiger's mouth. This was one area that I actually found really tricky. I definitely do struggle with drawing mouths and noses, and some of the tips and techniques I have to make it a little bit easier to draw these parts of an animal is to just try and break down the areas as much as possible. So there was some fur on the cheek just above the tiger's mouth, so when I was looking at my reference photo, I actually tried to view those areas more as shapes and patterns. So I looked at how the fur was positioned, what direction it was going in, and the shapes or patterns it was making, and that just helps me to understand the structure of the areas better. So I then added in some more specific details such as the fur strokes using the black pencil and a dark brown pencil, mainly the sepia pencil, and then I started shading in some lighter tones into the surrounding fur and building up the layers again. Also nearer the mouth section, I noticed that the fur was a lot shorter than the fur surrounding the tiger's eye, so to draw shorter fur I have to apply different techniques with the coloured pencils. So for long fur, you need to use quite long stroking motions to etch in those fur details, and the longer the pencil strokes, the longer the fur will appear. So for short fur, I just really had short and quick flicking motions with the pencils, so it gives the appearance of short fur. I also find that where the fur is really short, it can be really hard to see any fur details. So instead, it just looks more like shaded areas. So in some areas, I just focus mainly on shading in some pencil value rather than adding in some fur details. So shades and variations of tone are really important because you can still give the impression that there is some presence of fur or fur growth just by adding in shading and shadows. I also really like to use the white pencil for adding in some lighter areas and more specific fur details, although I do now use an embossing tool as well in my drawing process to preserve some really white areas and fine details. The white pencil is great though because you can add in some highlights, whiskers and tiny details to really add realism to a piece, and the white pencil I would really recommend you use is the white luminance pencil. So the Caran luminance set of pencils are extremely expensive. However, even if you don't own these pencils, I would really recommend that you invest in the white pencil. In my opinion, it is by far the best white coloured pencil and definitely tops the white pencil from the polychromos set and the Prismacolor set. So hopefully, as you can see, the whiskers really show up on the drawing, but I do think using an embossing tool to score the paper first would have been better and preserved some of those whiskers and areas even more and made them look whiter. So that is a technique that I am including in future tutorials. There is also another product that you can use for whiskers as well, and it's called Coloured Pencil Titanium White and Coloured Pencil Touch Up Texture by Brush and Pencil. It's a great product to use once you have finished a drawing because you mix the two products together to create a white paint-like substance that is archival with coloured pencils. I do actually have an upcoming tutorial featuring that product planned and a little demonstration on how to use that product as well for your highlights. Okay, so for this part of the tiger's face now, I noticed that it was definitely in more shadow than the left part of the tiger's face. So what I want to do is show a subtle change from some lighter areas into darker areas, and to increase those darker values, all I'm going to do is add in some darker colours. So again, for the ginger fur, I just follow the exact same process as I have for the whole of the fur. So I shade in some lighter values which adds in tone, depth and also aids with the blending, and then I start to build up on those tones with some midtones. So when I talk about midtones, I basically mean tones that are in between the light and dark tones. Tones that add value and transition from the lighter to darker tones, because we don't just want to go from a very light area to really dark, we need to add some midtones for that in-between stage. But for the areas that are more shadowed or darker, I make sure that I just keep building up the layers. If you keep building up layers, it will fill more of the paper grain in, so slowly the paper underneath will disappear and be filled with colour, and the more colour that you add, the more enriched your colours will become. So like with that section of fur that I am drawing, I just keep building up on those values by applying layers until I feel that the area is dark enough. Okay, so now just a tip if you are someone that struggles with getting the correct colours. I think that one of the most important things you need to do when you are trying to draw realistically is make sure that you are picking colours correctly. So to help you with this, there are different online software that you can download for free, and you can actually upload images to this software. Use a dropper tool on an area and it will tell you which pencils are the closest match to that specific area. One app that I know of is called Arty, and I found out about this app through Luke Hanlon Art, so thank you Luke, and it's a great app for helping you pick the right colours for your drawings. You can also use colour swatches to study areas of a reference photo and determine which colours are best suited for your drawings. You want to make sure that you are using the correct colours for a drawing, because that is going to help you build up on all of your tones and draw as accurately to the reference photo as possible. Okay, so now I'm just going to quickly recap on all the things I've mentioned in this tutorial. When you are trying to draw a realistic animal, make sure that you are paying attention to your reference photo. So be prepared for your drawing. Make sure that you have an accurate sketch and that you have picked out the right colours before you start. So make sure that you have a variation and good balance between the light, mid and dark tones in your drawing. This will help you to get that drawing as realistic as possible, and make sure that if you are drawing stripes, they look subtle and blend into the surrounding fur. The way in which you use your pencils is so important, so make sure that you are using the correct hand position, that you apply the right techniques, so for example the right amount of pencil pressure, and using the tip and side of the pencil will help you to vary that. For really bright areas, I would recommend that you preserve those areas by first using an embossing tool before you start a drawing, to gently etch in some fur details and whiskers by indenting the paper. You can also use a white pencil to go over some areas to lighten them up and add in some highlights as well. Make sure that you look at your shadows and light sources. So where are the lightest parts of an animal? Where is the light source hitting them? Where are there a lot of shadows? It's important to get in those lighter and darker tones to add depth and dimension to your drawing. Make sure that you do work in layers. Layers are really important because it allows you to build up your values over time, adds a lot of depth and realism to a piece, plus adding layers really aids with your blending. Blending is really important. You want to make sure that you are blending areas into each other, that it shows a soft and gentle transition from one area to the next. You want to avoid any harsh lines or creating blocks of colour, as that won't look realistic. When it comes to adding in those dark values, it's crucial for you to work from light to dark. Even when I was going in with a black pencil to etch in the details of the black stripes, I only did this with a really gentle hand, so if you're trying to get in some dark areas, keep your pencil light and always build up to your dark values. By going from light to dark, it means that you aren't going to risk going in way too dark early on or burnishing an area. If you burnish an area, this means that you've applied too much pressure to the paper and filled in the paper grain, meaning it's then going to be really difficult for you to add in any more details, values or tones. And lastly, for those really fine details, make sure that you add these in right at the end when you are happy with how your piece is looking. But anyway guys, this just about finishes off this tutorial, and I really do hope that you found this in-depth tutorial on how to draw a realistic tiger useful, and that you picked up a lot of helpful tips and techniques. I definitely really enjoyed this video, and I have lots of tutorials on how to draw animals coming out very soon, including some more wild animals, so I'm really excited to release those videos. But anyway guys, thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in my next video. Bye everyone!